Good afternoon. The Senate Environment, Natural Resources Policy and Legacy Finance Committee will come to order. Today is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2019. Our first bill up today is Senate File 2749. Senator Straczynski.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, for hearing the legacy presentation from the Minnesota Historical Society. The related bill for this presentation is Senate File 2749. As a history teacher, I believe wholeheartedly in the mission of the Minnesota Historical Society. I just wish someday we could figure out why this is. I can't tell you over the years how many parents at conferences would come to me and they'd sit down and they'd say, I hated history so much in high school and now I love it. And if we and the Historical Society could ever figure that out, why that is, it'd be a wonderful world. Article 7 of Section 15 of the Minnesota State Constitution says one of our duties here is to preserve Minnesota's history and cultural heritage. I will now turn it over to Mr. Kelleher.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee. Mr. Wentworth, are you going to go first?
Yes.
All right. Welcome. And please state your name for the record.
Chair Rude, Senators, my name is Kent Whitworth. For the last 9 months, it's been my privilege to serve as the Director and CEO of the Minnesota Historical Society. I am inspired by the fact that over the last 10 years, the Minnesota Historical Society has been able to oversee a surge of communities engaging with their local history in new ways. I'm also inspired by the fact that 10 years ago, Minnesotans voted to commit tax dollars to bettering our state for the future, including preserving our history and cultural heritage. You all have seen this report that is produced each year by the Minnesota Historical Society that captures that surge of communities engaging with their local history in new ways. We chose not to use the PowerPoint, but I think you should have a printed handout before you. So I'd like to touch briefly. There's one printed slide that lists the Minnesota History Coalition. Minnesota Historical Society is a core part of that. But I wanted to mention to you that that list of coalition members illustrates one of the positive byproducts of the Legacy Amendment, and that is the strengthening, the more collaborative relationships across Minnesota's historical organizations. And you see those organizations bulleted out. It's a very cohesive, collaborative group, and I think the legacy funding has enhanced that. And we thank you not only for the financial support, but for bringing our community, our professional community together. I'll hand off to my colleague.
Welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for having us in today. I'm David Kelleher from the Minnesota Historical Society. Continuing on a description of how the legacy funds have worked in the history field, if you take a quick look at the second page of the PowerPoint handout, there's a chart that shows how this has been structured for the last 10 years of history legacy appropriations. And of course, as Senator Straczynski said, the language in the Constitution guides us and says that we are to preserve Minnesota's history and cultural heritage. You have structured over those past 10 years the legacy appropriations in a number of areas, and really the three largest of those areas are grants, programs that the Minnesota Historical Society operates, and then a partnership category. And Kent and I will walk through each of those categories very briefly to give you a sense of how those have worked and what is contained and what isn't contained in each of those. So I'll first talk about the grants program, which we call the Historical and Cultural Heritage Grants Program. This is a statewide competitive grants program. Projects that go through this process have been thoroughly vetted and are ready to start. We have made over 2,500 grants in all 87 counties in the state in the 10 years since legacy appropriations have started. These are things for museum collections and environments, preserving historic structures, and all kinds of activities that history organizations, but also organizations that haven't traditionally done history, are preserving their own history. We do a two categories, small grants and large grants. The small grants are done 3 or 4 times a year. Those are $10,000 and under, and those give small organizations an opportunity to access the grants. And then the larger grants, over $10,000, are done once a year through the competitive grants process. There's lots of citizen participation. We have a group called the Historic Resources Advisory Committee. That's a group of volunteers that help to make decisions on which grants are funded. They are dedicated volunteers. They read hundreds of grant applications. We now have a paperless process, so they're reading on their laptops, and they spend lots of time before the meetings and then a 2-day meeting each year reviewing the grant applications. And those dedicated volunteers, last year we clocked them at 429 hours that they spent doing this. And of course, they're supported by our grants office, our hardworking colleagues in field services who help potential grantees through the process and advise them on the way to have a successful grant. They're not trying to fence people out, but they want to encourage successful grant applications. And they do this through workshops. They have an in-person open house once a month at the History Center, and they do workshops around the state in order to help people have a successful grant application. Madam Chair, on the next page, there's a map that's on page 12 of this report that shows where the grants have gone. 831 organizations in all 87 counties in the 10 years that Legacy has been in existence, and really the demand for these grants far exceeds the dollars available. Typically, it's at least 2 to 1 in applications, and there are more out there that have not applied. So the grants program has been extremely successful. If you all have constituents who are interested in this, we can introduce them to the grants office staff. There are lots of projects out there, maybe some that you've heard here. We can help them work through the competitive grants process.
Chair Rude, the next page in the printed PowerPoint slides focuses on the mission of the Minnesota Historical Society. The point here is that the legacy-funded projects operated by MNHS that are statewide, they grow right out of our core mission of preserving, sharing, and connecting. If you go to the next page, the heading is Statewide History Programs. Looking at, there are a few bullets there that highlight the programs that help us across the state preserve our history. And it includes everything from digitization to oral histories to cataloging important archaeological collections. The next page continues with the statewide programs that enable us to share Minnesota's history through the legacy funds. And in those cases, you look at exhibitions. Some of you are going to be familiar with the World War I exhibition that we have done, the 1968 exhibition, and the Somali history exhibit that opened in June at the History Center. It'll be up through this coming June. If you haven't seen it in your spare time, which I know is not very much, we'd encourage you to come over and see the Somali plus Minnesota exhibition. The final category of statewide programming operated by MNHS focuses on connecting people to the rich history of Minnesota. And if you look at that slide, you'll see curriculum development, the Legacy Field Trip Support Fund. It's important to know that 25% of our schools that we serve are on free and reduced lunch, and this provides us funding to make the History Center field trip experience accessible to them. Also, we're able to address our diversity and inclusion efforts, and also an internship program at the high school and the college level.
Madam Chair, after the Legacy Amendment passed in 2008 and the history community gathered to plan out how we would respond and take advantage of this amazing opportunity, one of the things that we recognized is that there's a lot of expertise in our field through local history organizations, historic preservation organizations. We thought that a good way to capture that experience and expertise was to have people work together. So we created this partnership category that encourages organizations to work together on a common history project, share expertise, share knowledge, financial resources, and learn from each other and build the community in the field as well. That has been successful, and that's been one of the categories in the appropriations over the course of the 10 years of the legacy appropriations. Finally, the last two somewhat smaller but not insignificant categories are the statewide survey of historical and archaeological sites. These will take either a theme or a geographical area for archaeological resources and try to learn more so that as development happens or projects happen in an area, we're prepared with the knowledge of what's out there. Sometimes that's gathering information that already exists and compiling it into an understandable grouping, and sometimes it's learning about new information on archaeological resources. That is a collaborative effort between the Minnesota Historical Society, the Indian Affairs Council, and the Office of the State Archaeologist, as well as the State Historic Preservation Office. So that's been a very successful endeavor as well. The Minnesota Digital Library is a collaboration between the Minnesota Historical Society, Minitex, and many, many local history organizations for those organizations to digitize their collections and make them available to people far and wide. Madam Chair, the request for this upcoming biennium from the Minnesota History Coalition is on the last slide and on your handout, and this represents a third of the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, and it's broken down in those categories that we just walked through. We appreciate the support that you and your predecessors have provided for history, and as Kent said, it's made a huge difference in our field. We've become more collaborative. We were previously, but we've worked together and we've spread history to people who haven't typically done work in this field. So it's been really, really successful. Madam Chair, we have a couple of testifiers who have worked on projects. There are thousands really of grants, but we have two people who want to say a few quick words about their experience with legacy funded projects in the history field. Laura Lepping worked on Northern Bedrock Historic Preservation Corps, and Wing Young Huey is a photographer, author, and just great storyteller and teacher. So we'll let them say a few words.
Welcome to the committee.
Hello.
Hi. Would you please state your name for the record?
My name is Laura Lepping, and I'm an alumna of Northern Bedrock Historic Preservation Corps, which is an AmeriCorps organization that's based out of Duluth and seeks to develop enduring workforce and life skills through service learning in historic preservation and community stewardship. I found my way to this organization after completing my undergraduate degree, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I feel lucky that I came across a listing for the Corps and a term of service with Northern Bedrock. At the time, I didn't really know what to expect, but it was within those 6 months that I ended up finding my passion for trades in historic preservation. I was introduced to many hands-on preservation skills like restoring log cabins, reshingling historic homes, and teaching people how to restore their own historic cemeteries. Yet it wasn't only those skills that I had gained, but I also learned about Minnesota heritage and grew to love the range of people and cultures across our state. After I completed my term of service, the skills and training I received directly enabled me to get internships in historic preservation at Point Reyes National Seashore and with the Western Center for Historic Preservation. These positions relied and expanded on the training and experience I gained through Northern Bedrock and deepened my interest and dedication to heritage studies and historic preservation. After spending my time outside of Minnesota, I finally found my way back due to my love for Minnesota heritage, history, and people, which was fostered during my time with Northern Bedrock. I didn't know the great impact it would have on my career and interests, but I'm ever grateful for my time as an AmeriCorps member. It was due to those 6 months that I found my passion, and I am now pursuing a master's degree in heritage studies and public history at the University of Minnesota. And I will continue working to preserve our heritages and historic structures. And ultimately, it was through this funding and appreciation of our Minnesota landscapes that I was able to be here today.
Thank you, and congratulations on your success. Welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself for the record.
Hi, my name is Wing Young Huey. What am I? That is, I collected an array of answers to that question from my book, Chineseness, The Meanings of Identity and the Nature of Belonging, published recently by the Minnesota Historical Society. What am I is a question that has confused me for much of my life. I am the youngest of 6, and I'm the only one in my family not born in China. Instead, I was conceived and oriented in Duluth, Minnesota. I am a native Minnesotan. When I was growing up, we were the only Asian family in our neighborhood, and I was the only Asian student in my school. And I was the only Asian student in my school till high school. And I remember this other Asian student showed up. When he showed up, when I saw him, I avoided him. And it took me a long time to really confront the idea of why I would avoid this other Asian student. And I didn't really think about it for many years, until after I became an adult and became a photographer. And I realized that when I was growing up, I thought I was like everyone else. I read the same books, watched the same TV shows, movies as everyone else. But you don't grow up with a mirror in front of you. The people around you are your mirror. And when I forgot what I looked like. So when I saw this other Asian student, I realized I stick out. He sticks out, I must stick out. I didn't want to think about that for many years. When I was growing up, people would ask me, where are you from? I would say, I'm from Duluth. And then they go, no, where are you really from? I go, no, I really am from Duluth. It's not a, and people are curious, they just want to know, but if you get that question a lot, what is implied in that question is, you're not one of us. And who gets to decide who we are? So I think how I grew up has a lot to do with what I do as a photographer. I went to China for the first time 8 years ago, working with the U.S. Embassy. And coming from Minnesota, a place where I feel like like everyone else, but I stick out. I go to a place where I look like everyone, and I really feel like a foreigner. So I started thinking about Chineseness and what is identity, and who gets to decide what identity is. How much of it is personal, cultural, political? What is it imposed? And so I collected an array of answers from hundreds of people throughout China, throughout Minnesota, and other parts of the United States about the question of identity through the prism of Chineseness. And so I feel that I learned a lot, and as a Minnesotan, I feel like there's still a large gap between the perception of who we are as Minnesotans and the realities. And hopefully this book will help to close part of that gap. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate your testimony today. Members, other questions? Senator Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Keller, as you know, I'm a history buff and also a military buff. How does this, and I was looking through this trying to see where the funding and what would be at Fort Snelling and what would be up at the Minnesota Military Museum up at Camp Ripley. And of course, both of those places have a long history of military history and programming. Are we going to stick with that in those two programs, or what type of programs are going to continue to be there?
Mr. Kelleher.
Madam Chair, Senator Howe, of course, at Fort Snelling, we're always going to tell military history because that is the core of what that story is about. There are many, many other stories that we're going to tell at that site because that site has a wide range of history. With legacy funding, we have used some funding for program planning at Fort Snelling, but our regular operating budget devotes resources to Fort Snelling, and then of course in the capital budget there have been resources appropriated for the Fort Snelling project. As far as the Minnesota Military Museum, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head if they have received some legacy grants. I believe they have, but I would need to look back and see if they have. I know that we've worked with them over the years. They receive a general fund appropriation through us, so we've worked with them on that basis. But certainly military history is an important part of what we do, and in fact, we just hired a staff person who had worked at Fort Snelling for a dozen years and is a member of the Minnesota Guard, who is going to be our Veterans and Military Outreach person.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I can just express that, you know, I understand that you're going to put other programs there, but I can only stress that when I go to Fort Snelling, I think most folks think of the military piece of that, and I would like to stress that I think that's where we need to actually put a lot of emphasis is on that era and how we came from when it was first built up to today's era, and I just like to stress that I'd like to see that we continue that tradition.
Thank you. Senator Senjum.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just have a quick question, I believe. It's going through the bill, and I'm looking at the back page of the handout, and I didn't use a calculator on this, but is the appropriation request generally about 95 million in that neighborhood?
Mr. Keller.
Madam Chair, Senator Senjum, are you asking about the grand total of the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund?
The grand total of 2479. Or 49, I'm sorry.
Mr. Keller.
Madam Chair, Senator Senjum, I don't know the grand total of the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. I think it's maybe somewhere around.
I just mean on this bill, I won't say it so crassly, but what the price of this bill is to the process.
It's about 47 million is the total, which represents about a third of the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. That's the total.
Okay, so I'm looking at the back page. I see 47 million and the first dot and then subsequent dots. So we don't add all those together. Is that it? Okay.
47 is the total of the other programs that we had walked through, Madam Chair, Senator Senjum.
Thank you. Madam Chair, may I just
Senator
ask?
Senjum.
And maybe you've announced this. Does our fiscal person have the amount of our budget for this? I mean, how much money do we have to allocate for all of these grants?
You have that figure. I don't have it off the top of my head, yes, but it's based on the sales tax, and so and the percentages are all, you know, there's 4 different pots that it is divided up into statutorily, and they all statutorily have an amount of money.
Get that along the way.
Absolutely, Senator. Mr. Stanley will probably have it for you. Okay. Members, are there other questions? With that, thank you very much for your presentation today, and thank you, Senator Sojinski, for carrying this bill. And with that, Senate File 2749 will be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Senator Eichhorn. Is he in the room? There you are. Senate File 1178, Senator Eichhorn. And I would remind everyone today we have a long agenda to get through, so I would appreciate you being very brief and succinct today. Thank you. Welcome, Senator Eichhorn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to present Senate File 1178 to your committee. It's a $200,000 a year in each year of the biennium appropriation to the Children's Discovery Museum in Grand Rapids to design and build interactive exhibits and develop hands-on learning. They have received money in the past. This would be to do new projects, new things, so we're supplementing, not supplanting. They've done a lot of real high-quality, science-based work in the past that really gets kids engaged in play and helps kids learn. But the folks from the Children's Museum in Grand Rapids would be much better to talk with you about that. Before I hand it over to them, I will say that you know, it's one of the only museums in northern Minnesota, and they do serve a lot of folks from a lot of members' districts. I know they serve folks from your district, Madam Chair, and Senator Matthews' district, and as far over as Duluth. So they do a lot of good work, and I'm going to hand it over to John Kelsch first.
Welcome to the committee, Mr. Kelsch, and please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Kelsch, Senior Director, Children's Discovery Museum. I want to thank the Chair and each committee member for your time and genuine interest today. The Children's Discovery Museum in Grand Rapids, Minnesota is one of the only children's museums located in a remote and rural area anywhere in the United States. Our school service program reaches out to a broad geographic area of 10 counties: Aiken, Beltrami, Carleton, Cass, Clearwater, Crow Wing, Hubbard, Itasca, Couchiching, and St. Louis. We've even reached Blue Earth, Lake of the Woods, Mahnomen, Mille Lacs, Todd, and Wadena. You have 2 documents in your packets. The first one shows how school teachers are rating our programs. These are average scores, with 5 being strongly agree and 1 being strongly disagree. In all the questions we've asked, we have average scores of 4.5 or higher. And these are from 250 written surveys from school teachers. When we asked the question, do our programs help support academic standards set by the Minnesota Department of Education, the average rating was 4.53. The second document lists all the schools we've served in the last 18 years. There's 227 different schools from 58 different school districts, 88 different communities from 17 different counties. Over the last school year, to give you an idea of enrollment, we had 3,817 children, school children, 599 teachers, and 452 parent chaperones, for a total enrollment of 4,868. If you add our annual walk-in attendance of 20,170, our total annual attendance is over 25,000 people. And all of this is in a community with a population of 10,000 and a county with only a population of 44,000 people. Please take a minute to glance at the 4-color school programs that we offer, the many different curriculums geared toward different age groups. We're still focusing quite a bit on anti-bullying programs. We do that for pre-K and kindergarten, and also for 2nd to 4th grade. I like to say we take kids out of the classroom into a new world of discovery. We take them off the bleachers and put them in the game. We take them out of the audience and put them in the play. A 2014 study by the Institute of Museum Services revealed that children who visited museums in kindergarten had higher achievement scores in reading, math, and science at the 3rd grade level than those who did not. And this showed up even more so in the subgroup of children from low-income families. When 50 Nobel Prize winners were asked about their greatest childhood influence, most said having stimulating experiences at a museum was the central one. It led them to ask questions and try to answer them. One of our volunteers, Pamela Miner, is here today. She just has a few words.
Good afternoon. It's
Good
very
afternoon.
nice to
Welcome.
be here. It's my first Senate meeting, and I've had laryngitis, so I hope I'm clear.
And would you just identify yourself for the
Pamela Miner.
Thank you.
And I've been a volunteer for over 20 years at the Children's Discovery Museum. And just briefly, I wish you could just see the excitement on these kids' faces when they step off that school bus from north, south, east, west, and from all points. And they enter the museum for a day of fun and learning. And it is, it's tearful at times because the excitement to learn is there. One school teacher wrote us saying it's a long drive, 1.5 hours, 2 hours for us, but it's worth it. We wouldn't be able to come here without the help of everybody, the bus grant, the free admission for the kids. Another teacher commented on the kids loving to come there. Everything is hands-on and very engaging. I love the science objectives, they tell us. These comments and observations come from over 265 written surveys by the school teachers. Even a parent chaperone wrote, "Thank you for helping me spend the quality time with my child that I usually wouldn't be able to." Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Senator Eichhorn, members, are there any questions? Well, Senator Eichhorn, I know that my grandchildren have come over on the bus and enjoyed the museum very much, so I appreciate you bringing this forward today. So with that, Senate File 1178 will be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. Thank you for coming. I know you made a journey too today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Syndrome.
Madam Chair, our staff did give me a number, and for the benefit of the committee, it's 138 million for the biennium.
Yeah, okay. Senator Eichhorn, Senate File 1379.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to present Senate File 1379. It's an appropriation. Well, I'd like to take a step back and thank the folks that helped me on the bill, Senator Dietzick, Torres Ray, Senjum, and you, Madam Chair. $650,000 in each year of the biennium appropriated from the Arts and Culture Heritage Fund for a grant to Wilderness Inquiry Canoemobile Program. And as this committee is well aware, we have a rich and diverse outdoor heritage in Minnesota, and we must do what we can to pass on this legacy and enormous responsibility to the next generation of Minnesotans. Enjoying and experiencing the outdoors is part of what makes us Minnesotans, and we have an abundance of waterways and parks that bring people here from all over the world. This will help, improve access to our waterways and public lands. I'm proud to carry this legislation today that would provide the money to Wilderness Inquiry so they can do the great work that they're doing across the state with students to what I guess has been called floating classrooms to learn the history of Minnesota throughout the waterways. I'm excited to work with them. You'll hear some better testimony from them. They can really tell you a lot more about the great things they do, but they do good work to helping that next generation of Minnesotans really care about the environment and the great things we have here in this state. So I'll let them expand on that and see
Welcome
if
to the committee, and who would like to go first?
I'll be going first, Madam. So my name is Nicole Tupi. I work as a warehouse coordinator with Wilderness Inquiry. And before I kind of get started with the rest of my spiel, if you will, I want to thank everyone here for coming today and for giving us this opportunity.
Ms. Tupi, could you pull the microphone a little closer? Thank you.
Is that better?
Much better, thank you.
So once again, my name is Nicole Tupi. So besides being a warehouse coordinator with Wilderness Inquiry, I am also a current student at the University of Minnesota. Originally, I actually come from the northwest part of the state, a little place called Park Rapids. So I'm not sure if anybody here is from Park Rapids or knows of it, but that's my hometown. So to give you a little bit of background, Wilderness Inquiry is a nonprofit. We're based out of Dinkytown here, and we connect 40,000 people to the outdoors annually, with a special focus on reaching underserved individuals, including people with disabilities and youth from low-income backgrounds. Like I said, I'm from Park Rapids, and I lived on 144 acres growing up, surrounded by not one, but 2 lakes and a river. I love the outdoors. My family, we went camping and fishing and hiking all the time. However, my mom has a disability. So as we all got older, and as that disability came to the fore, it got harder and harder for all of us to go out and spend time in the outdoors as a family. When I came to the University of Minnesota, I came down here to be a nurse. That was my passion at the time. However, through the University of Minnesota, I actually got connected with Greg Lace and Wilderness Inquiry and quickly realized that that was where my niche was. I wanted to be in the outdoors and connect these students to what I found to be such an inspirational part of being a Minnesotan. I started with Wilderness Inquiry, doing their urban trips here in the Twin Cities area. But honestly, when I started working with the students from greater Minnesota, all the way from Rochester, all the way up to Thief River Falls, I just it came alive for me. I got to see all of the students, the smiles on their faces come alive, all that history that we get to that we get in 6th grade and under. It just when you're in that Voyager canoe, it comes to you very naturally. Excuse me. Often people think that youth, like myself, from the rural areas, we don't need these programs. However, I can tell you from personal experience that this is not true. We absolutely need all of these opportunities for all of our Minnesota kids. I was lucky that my family camped and hunted and fished all the time. And I've seen the outdoors come alive and bring people together, identifying us as Minnesotans. Regardless of our geography or our background, we share this culture and this heritage together. Not all rural kids are getting outside. And when they are, they might not realize or recognize all the ways that they can recreate and use our state lands and our public lands. Through the legacy funding, wilderness inquiry can expand to reach all of these kids from all of the regions of our great state. We want to teach history standards through outdoor learning, preserve our cultural heritage, and continue to motivate our youth to explore and enjoy our public lands. When I was leading trips, whether it was in the Twin Cities here or in the Moorhead area, history, like I said, came alive for these students. They were experiencing it instead of just reading about it. A teacher who has seen a similar impact and who I've actually worked with on trail, Sintog Haas, is also here to to expand a little bit more on that.
Thank you, and welcome to the committee, Mr. Haas. Would you please state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Sintong Haas. Thank you, Chair Rudd and members of the committee for allowing me this time to share the amazing work Wilderness Inquiry has done with us. I'm a teacher and Earth Club faculty advisor over at Harding High School on the east side of St. Paul. As a teacher, my job is to teach, but my real passion is to get my students to experience, respect, enjoy the natural world around them throughout Minnesota. With the help of Wilderness Inquiry, we've been able to achieve this goal with many at Harding. Wilderness Inquiry has taken my students on several paddling trips around Minnesota. We've paddled the Mississippi River around Fort Snelling, along sections of the St. Croix River, and on the Minnesota River by Murphy's Landing. Wilderness Inquiry has also taken my students on multi-day camping trips to state and regional parks, including Interstate State Park near Taylor's Falls, Wild River State Park near North Branch, and several other parks. For my students, who are mostly first-generation Americans, these quintessential Minnesota cultural experiences just wouldn't happen. So I want to thank WI for allowing that, and the Legacy Foundation for allowing that as well, or Legacy Funding for allowing that. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the experiences that Wilderness Inquiry have provided for my students have been life-changing. After seeing the night sky without city lights or camping for the first time, some of my students have said that camping with WI has been the best thing they did in high school. These experiences have led some of my students to plan future careers in outdoor education. Abdul Malik Douad, who isn't here today, he's camping in near Grand Marais this weekend, is a first-generation Nigerian immigrant who's been part of the Wilderness Inquiry initiative called the Outdoor Career Academy. He started working at WI headquarters as a shy, timid sophomore. Through skills he's attained after 2 years working at Wilderness Inquiry, he's now a confident leader and president of our Earth Club. He's also planning to work at Wilderness Inquiry as a trip leader after college. So I, along with my students, hope you support Wilderness Inquiry's request for $650,000 per year to connect 20,000 students across the state to outdoor experiences that preserve Minnesota's outdoor cultural heritage and teach Minnesota history through hands-on learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there questions? Well, thank you, Senator Eichhorn. Mr. Elfritz and I spent an afternoon on the Mississippi River with Wilderness Inquiry, and it was quite delightful, so we really appreciated the experience. So thank you for bringing that forward. With that, Senate File 1379 will be held over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. Thank you. Senator Eichhorn, one more.
Last one today, although if you want, I could probably find another.
I'm sure you could.
Ready for me to start?
Absolutely,
All right.
Senator.
Thank you for the opportunity to present Senate File 1580 to you today. And I'd like to thank my co-sponsor, Senator Rarick. It's an appropriation for the American Indian Legacy Grant. This bill is intended to help set aside a specific grant allotment for the American Indian communities in our state. In previous years, it was a concern that grants that had been allocated for American Indian art projects and their focus of these projects was not around Native culture and heritage. For example, the Paul Bunyan exhibit that was classified under the Native category for grant money only had one piece relating to Native culture in the exhibit. This legislation would help ensure that grants for arts relating to history and culture of our American Indian Indigenous people in our state will be created for the Native people, by the Native artists, and to share in Native communities. This again will appropriate $2,500,000 in each year of the biennium for them to do that good work. And with that, we do have a couple testifiers to talk about the great work they're doing and why this would benefit their groups.
Thank you, and welcome to the committee. Who would like to go first? Thank you. Please identify yourself for the record.
Crystal Norcross. And I also have a couple of cards that I'd like to hand out to all of you, if that's okay. These are. Thank you. Hamatakiapi. Crystal Norcross Hemachiapi. Shukmanitu wa we Hemachiapi. Damakota. Damakota we. System wapte noyate Hemata ha. Imnizaska Edwati. Madam Chair Committee. I am the board of Wayate Hotanen, which means the voice of the people. I've been involved with Native arts and heritage all of my life, going on 30 years. I'm a hoop dancer, spoken word artist, traditional sewer, and storyteller. Today I come to the committee because Native arts and heritage seem to be lacking in our modern society. I recently had the opportunity to meet with a government official from Canada and was moved to learn the large budgets that Canada makes available for its Aboriginal people. It brings me to the point of wondering why we don't have the same commitment here. This all stems from the Walker Scaffold, which really shed light on the absence of American Indian people in arts. The impact made a lot of Indian people relive trauma. I remember getting my first calls among the Dakota 38 scaffold had appeared on the Walker grounds, highly visible to passing traffic on Highway 94. I was in the hospital in the last days of my high-risk pregnancy, which required bed rest. Instead, I knew I needed to see this with my own eyes and needed to be there. When I got there, I was shocked and angered. Who would allow this? We knew this was the reaction the artist was looking for, but he didn't think about us, the Dakota Oyate. It is sad to say many Dakota people never healed from these traumas. So, we as Dakota people and Native artists knew that the impact in the community was significant, even alarming, and that the amount of trauma had to be addressed. We started a series of conversations in the community. That was the place where this bill was born. The incidents revealed two issues. One, American Indian people lack adequate resources and visibility in our homeland to tell our own stories and protect our heritage. Two, stories and images are unique in their ability to make large amounts of money for other people. We are seeking an American Indian Legacy Grant program so the invisible can become visible. The grant program would provide participation by the American Indian community in several ways. One, more American Indian artists will participate through a specific amount of money committed to American Indian art in all of its forms. Two, the American Indian community will select projects to be funded which will combat the cultural appropriation of our images, stories, and intellectual properties. And three, the selected American Indian projects will promote a vibrant, honest American Indian worldview, the first and foundational Minnesota legacy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is John Poupart. I'm a Chippewa Indian from the Lac de Flambeau Reservation. I now live in Dakota County in City West St. Paul. I'm the retired president of the American Indian Policy Center located here in St. Paul and the Hamlin campus. I'm also retired from the State Department of Corrections, having served 25 years there. And I'm now a consultant, education training about American Indians, history, legal, political situation in America. And it's, I don't want to speak exclusively to the bill. I wanted to expand on that, how we got to be where we're at in discussing this particular item today.
I will remind you that we have a lot of bills up today, so
okay.
please.
I'm going to try and be as brief as my previous presenter. Yeah, in the, I just want to register that our American Indian history and culture is an oral history. It has not been preserved in writing or records. Our contemporary version is we're struggling with a wide array of racial disparities in the Indian community, particularly because we don't have that history of the Native people here in the country. And this unwritten oral history has a lot to do with preserving and resurrecting the arts and the culture within our communities. I just want to reference the petroglyphs, the birch bark scrolls. Contemporary society has a difficult time interpreting these particular pieces of art in our community, and they have no widespread coverage. So we need authentic American history and art, and this House File 1580 will lead us into that direction. And the last point I want to make is that when people want to know about the culture and the oral history of American Indians, it is to the American Indian people themselves that they must come, because we have scant presence in the literature, in the academic institutions of America. We have scant coverage. So this piece of legislation will support these kinds of efforts in our communities. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you all for hearing us. I'll read through this as speedy as possible. My name is Rory Erler. Wake 'em up. Sorry about that.
Welcome.
And I just noticed on the Great Seal down there is a native on a horse. Anyway, so art and messaging, right? Anyway, EchoHawk Consulting recently completed a $3 million national study called Reclaiming Native Truth. The findings in the study confirmed what most Native people already know but had no data to back it up. 3 findings can sum up what I want to get across in this hearing. Invisibility is the modern form of bias against Native Americans, 1. And 2, the majority of Americans know little to nothing about Native Americans. The 3rd, one of the good points from the study is that 78% of Americans are interested in learning more about Native cultures, and that a strong majorities support Native positions on most issues. Ignorance is a barrier. As an artist, my biggest barrier has been that non-Native folks that know nothing about my culture are the gatekeepers of opportunity for me and other Native artists. We often have to sacrifice our desired aesthetic and art concepts to appease the ignorance of these gatekeepers. This cycle perpetuates the stereotype. In the museum world, we call this ignorant lens the museum effect. It stems from a long history of myths and stereotypes about us created by ignorance and racism. Ideologically corrupt was a term used by museums to call our arts, crafts, and contemporary culture inauthentic. Through the history of museums, this non-Native perspective has solidified an aesthetic that does not belong to contemporary Native peoples. Fine arts galleries and craft markets are much the same, but that aesthetic was built on the European gaze. European gaze is even worse than the museum effect because it's built on racist stereotypes of Hollywood and pop culture. Even in philanthropy and public arts funding, we run into these barriers of stereotypes and ignorance. Even though these institutions tend to have more people of color on staff and on selected committees, they still share that lens of ignorance. We are still here as a movement that is an emerging movement, is going to be the movement of our generation. Our goal is to use the data from the Reclaiming Native Truth study to reclaim our narrative in pop culture, K-12 education, governments, and philanthropy, self-determination. These public funds will not only allow us to create our own arts, but it will help educate the 78% of Americans interested in learning about Native cultures and who we are from our authentic perspective. It is time for us to have the privilege to determine for ourselves what our arts is to become and what artists we want to represent our arts and culture into the future. Miigwech.
Thank you. Members, have their questions? Senator Torres-Ray. Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you, Senator Eichhorn. With that, with no further discussion, Senate File 1580 will be laid over for possible inclusion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more bills, Senator?
I can find another one still if you want. Thank you.
Senator Franz, welcome to the committee. Senate File 821 when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
So I'm just dying to know about the fish. I've been looking at the fish here.
You can give them to the pages if you want. Madam Chair, we'll get right to the point, and the fish are about 2/3 of the way through the presentation.
Okay.
But a little forward spin would be some walleye and some northern. Madam Chair, members, I'm proud to present to you Senate File 821, which is an appropriation for the Children's Museum of Southern Minnesota. It's located in the city of Mankato. I want to start by thanking my co-authors, Senator Eaton, Senator Swadzinski, and Senator Draheim, whose house is about the same distance from the Children's Museum as mine is. This is a museum that I'll let my testifiers talk about, but a few things I think are worth pointing out. We opened with an expectation of 40,000 visitors a year. We reached 104,000. People from 70 of Minnesota's 87 counties have come through these doors, and I'm very proud to present this bill alongside the other fine bills that you're hearing and the other Minnesotans that are asking for your help. This is one that the city of Mankato and Southern Minnesota are extremely proud of, and the participation rate is higher than we could have hoped, and we have dreams to go even higher. We see kids from schools, people from town, groups through, learning about all facets of Minnesota life and legacy and culture. And you'll have in your packet there a handout from the Southern Minnesota Children's Museum, and I'll let the testifiers talk about the details, but I ask you to take a quick look at the heat map, which is the diagram which shows the state of Minnesota and gives you an idea of the number of people that attend this museum and benefit from the exhibits. The appropriation is for $400,000 in 2020, and with that, I'd like to turn it over to my testifier, first Deb. So introduce yourself. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and welcome to the committee.
Thank you. My name is Deb Johnson. I am the Senior Director of Museum Experiences and Environments at the Children's Museum of Southern Minnesota. I want to thank my colleagues, Sue Larson, who is the Community Impact Director, and our two amazing volunteers who you have seen in your offices, Lucy Lowry and Sue Schwickert. I will keep this brief. I know you have a lot of testimony to hear today, but I do want to point you to the first four goals that come from you and come from the Minnesota Humanities Center that help us guide in our actions and our outcomes to really highlight what we've done in those four areas to start off our testimony today. The first one, Minnesota arts, culture, and heritage are woven into every facet of the Children's Museum of Southern Minnesota. We are a place-based museum. our exhibits, and our programming really highlight Dakota culture, Minnesota agriculture, STEM learning, and early childhood. We showcase the craftsmanship and artistry of Minnesota artists. We co-create with our community, with our region, with our business leaders, with parents, with educators. That is part of our model, the co-creation of exhibits and experiences at our museum. The second goal that's laid out from the Minnesota Humanities Center is that there will be an increase, a dramatic increase in the number of Minnesotans of all ages, ethnicities, abilities, and incomes who have experienced arts, culture, and heritage through the power of play, through this appropriation. Examples of how we do that, as Nick mentioned, Senator Frentz. As he mentioned, we had 104,000 visitors last year. 70 of Minnesota's 87 counties were represented in our population. Our access initiatives, which again include limited income, limited language or cultural issues, ability or special needs, are highlighted in our membership rates and our field trip representation. We're a popular field trip destination. We served over 8,000 school-age children last year. 20% of those school-age visitors come from an access or free and reduced lunch rate that's very high in Minnesota. The third goal, that people will trust the museum's stewardship of public arts, culture, and heritage funding. I want to point out on the front page of our document that we shared with you today that we are really intentional, we're scrappy, we're resourceful. We leveraged funds of over $500,000 last year with the help of saying we get public funding, we get grants, we get donor funds, but we leveraged in-kind support of over $500,000. We also leveraged over 6,700 hours of volunteer services. That's 3 full-time equivalents of staff. So we're trying to stretch and be really resourceful, respectful of public funding, using all avenues to really bring resources into our museum. The Minnesota Humanities Center, who's basically our auditor, said that we were, in a letter of support, an exemplary grantee, and that's really to the testament of Sue Larson and her integrity that she helps make sure that we set our standards for the people of Minnesota and the public funding we do get. The fourth goal, that Minnesota arts, culture, and heritage will continue to thrive at our museum. We were voted the best place to take children in 2018 through the Mankato Free Press and the Greater Mankato Growth. We were receiving an award for being an epic indoor playground. If you haven't come and played in our Tree of Forts yet, please come and do so. Grab your favorite 4-year-old, your favorite 9-year-old, come down and play. Nick will be glad to buy you lunch and show you around. He shared that with me earlier.
Not in any effort to influence this committee, Madam Chair.
Certainly not. Not intended at all. Just highlighting Nick's generosity. Also wanted to point out that our goal would be to use the funds for continuing our Dakota thread with a language-based Dakota exhibit, using funding for the rotating space. We are bringing a healthcare exhibit on April 9th, so if you're able to swing by and see that experience with a giant operation game, a 4-foot sneezing nose, glow germ in the bathrooms to highlight important hand washing. We intend to bring unparalleled Southern Minnesota arts, culture, and heritage experiences and impact the 22 counties we see school field trip experiences from. 22 counties all across Southern Minnesota come to the museum. And with that, I will close by saying thank you for your time, and I'm really anxious for some questions from you.
Thank you. Members, are there questions? Well, you just did an excellent job, but you still didn't tell me about the fish.
So we have an amazing group of women that show up on Mondays, and they sew for us. It's this amazing group of women that were our founding mothers, and they come in on Mondays, and they have created walleye and northern pike for our ice fishing experience that we have with our winter cabin, highlighting northern Minnesota and the experiences up in with snowshoeing and dog sledding and skiing and ice fishing. So these were handmade by our sewing team. We also have our fruits and vegetables that are prototyped on site. We're getting ready to bring this to the Association of Children's Museums in May to hopefully create another line of business where we can actually sell these across the country to other museums that are looking for high quality prototyped experiences. And we do that all through volunteer support. If you'd like to see these, I'm sure Nick would be glad to share them.
Thank you very much.
You want to see them? Feel free to pass those around.
Thank you for bringing this forward, Senator Frentz. If there's no further discussion, Senate File 821 will be laid over for possible inclusion. And I do want to thank the volunteers for coming up also. That's very nice that they would make the trip with you also. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
you.
Thank you, members.
Next up, we have Senator Howe, Senate File 2210. Senator Howe, you're competing with the fish at this moment.
Well, I've competed with much tougher, but we will see how today goes.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate File 2210 is the Library Legacy Bill. It provides $2.5 million each year to Minnesota's 12 regional public library systems for arts and cultural heritage programming. Regional public library systems are great legacy partners because their 356 branch libraries enable free legacy programs available to residents throughout the state of Minnesota. Legacy funding is important to regional library systems because they improve the quality of life for individuals and spark community involvement. They expand cultural awareness and develop a sense of history and create connections between communities and artists. They support Minnesota artists, historians, authors, and highlight the rich historical and cultural stories of our state. And with that, today I have Karen Punsack, an executive director for the Great Regional Library, and also Liz Lynch at the Lake Agassiz Regional Library Director. So they're the testifiers, and I told them to be short, succinct, and we'll get out of here unscathed.
Thank you. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Karen Punsack. I'm Executive Director for Great River Regional Library. And I want to thank the committee members for the time to talk today about the impact of arts and cultural heritage funds in public libraries. I also want to thank Senator Howe for bringing this bill forward, and Senator Carlson, who was another author, as well as Senators Eichhorn, Engebretson, and Eaton. So our regional library system is one of 12 across the state, and we have 32 libraries across 5,000 miles. Our largest library is headquartered in St. Cloud with 68,000 people, but our smallest community that we serve is Great Eagle with 330 people. And we use library legacy funding to provide equitable access to high-quality arts and history programs so that they reach across the state, no matter the community size. So public libraries are a trusted community venue, and we amplify the work of local artists, performers, and community partners. Legacy funding in libraries means residents can attend free history programs in their hometown without driving long distances. And it also allows local artists and performers to showcase their work in a local venue. One example of one of the programs that we've done at Great River Regional Library was a partnership with the Minnesota Military Museum at Camp Ripley. We actually hired historian Doug Thompson to tour some of our libraries, and he met with residents to identify military objects, and he also helped them decipher military records. St. Cloud Public Libraries also partnered with the Minnesota Historical Society, who you heard from earlier today. They brought in the History Day Hullabaloo at the St. Cloud Library several years in a row, and that allows students to research on their Minnesota History Day projects. We actually have schools bringing buses into the library for the event. Some of the other programs we host, Secrets of the Congdon Mansion, The Art of Macrame, Anishinaabe Bead Arts. The range is very wide and broad, and it's generated by local interest. And we do have an event guide at Great River, so if you want to see any of our programs or come to them, they're free, so you're all welcome to show up at any time. Last year, we hosted over 189 programs across our region with over 9,200 people coming. And the things that they say are keep bringing these terrific programs to our small rural towns. or each program's entertaining, informative, and very social in our community. So this bill is asking for the same amount of funding that libraries have received in last year's legacy bill, $2.5 million annually. Minnesotans show that they value arts and cultural opportunities in their public libraries. So we'd like to continue this work across the 87 counties in the state. Please support this bill.
Thank you. And welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Liz Lynch, and I'm the director of the Lake Agassiz Regional Library System, and we provide library service in 7 counties in northwest Minnesota. I'm here today on the behalf of Minnesota's 12 regional public library systems and residents across the state who deeply appreciate the opportunity provided in Minnesota as a result of the partnership between legacy funding and public libraries. Public libraries have been offering meaningful programs and featuring Minnesota authors, artists, historians, and musicians free of charge, thanks to the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. We have partnered with schools, nursing homes, assisted living centers, and community organizations to ensure that lifelong learners, regardless of geography, age, income level, and educational level, have opportunities to grow as individuals and connect with their neighbors. For rural Minnesota, this is about building community, improving quality of life, and building awareness, skills, and knowledge, and providing a platform for community conversations. Last year, Lake Agassiz Regional Library provided over 80 events in our communities around our region, with a total attendance of 5,000. Popular programs included Minnesota and the Great War, World War II and Nurses of Clay County, demonstrations of powwow drumming and singing, tall tales and folklore from northern Minnesota, and a number of Minnesota authors and artists sharing their talents and their stories. These programs are important to our community members, and we know this because they tell us. They fill out evaluation forms, they stop us in the grocery store, and they send us letters thanking us for these opportunities. Across the state, public libraries have offered nearly 22,000 programs with 22,000 programs with an attendance of over 3.2 million in the past 10 years, resulting in over 11,000 partnerships statewide. On the behalf of the 12 regional public library systems and the residents of Minnesota, help us to continue to support our communities by providing $2.5 million to regional public library systems annually so that we can continue to enrich the lives of Minnesotans across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there questions? Well, thank you, Senator Howe. We know that much of the success of the legacy amendment is because we have great access to the libraries that bring the programs to much of Minnesota. So thank you for bringing this forward today. And with that, Senate File 2210 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Senator Curran. Senate File 1408, when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today we have Senate File 1408, and it's a fairly simple bill. It's a $40,000 appropriation for from the Arts and Culture Heritage Fund to the Governing Board of the Minnesota Historical Society for a grant to the Isanti County Historical Society. And Madam Chair, I'm not sure, I would feel inadequate. Maybe my request doesn't have enough zeros in it, but it is only a one-time appropriation of $40,000. But
Senator Curran, much of what we do is to help communities, and the small grants are just as important as the big grants.
I agree, and with that, Madam Chair, much easier to approve. So, there's more room for us little guys. With that, Madam Chair, we also have the director of the Isanti County Historical Society, and would love to have him provide the story and why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Sam Klockstein. I'm the executive director of the Isanti County Historical Society. I've been there for almost a year now, and it's been quite the experience as a new position and as a new role. overseeing and managing a wonderful organization. I live in the area up there, and I'm very active in our community. And basically what we're looking at, we have these two historic structures within Isanti County, one of which is the Moody School. It's the oldest standing one-room schoolhouse in our county. It's still in very good condition, but we'd like to do some restoration work to it and have it moved to our facility, our Heritage Center located in Cambridge, Minnesota. That building is something that would be very good for educational purposes, for on-site programming for students of all ages, and have, get some of these buildings that are threatened for being lost forever, to get them into a place that they can be utilized and enjoyed for generations. The Grandy Union Church is located in Grandy, Minnesota, which is just north of Cambridge. And that is another classic example of a one-room rural church that resides in the tiny town of Grandy, Minnesota. It's oozing with character, if that's a good description. It's something that you drive by and you think to yourself, all the things that have happened in that church over the last 120 years, weddings, funerals, marriages, just things that strike emotion when you drive by it. And taking this structure, again, getting it to a point where we can use it and enjoy it for educational purposes and maintain these historic structures in our county is what our goal is. I feel as a director that, people that come into my office, you hear stories, you hear experiences of people who went to the church, who went to the school, and, capturing those stories and having those to tell people in the future and have the building that they are telling us about is something we're striving for. So,
thank you. Members, are there questions? Well, thank you for coming here today. And Senator Curran, Senate File 1408 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Senator Lang?
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much. Senator Andrew Lang, today I have with you a couple of bills, and the first one to start, Senate File 1404. Just give you a little rundown of it before I let Mr. Glazer talk. I'm happy to support 1404. This represents a one-time appropriation of $75,000 to the Ampers Veteran Voices Korea project, actually, this time around. So, and just a reminder to you all, Ampers is the Association of Minnesota Public Radio Educational Stations. The association represents 18 independent community radio stations from around the state. And Mr. Glazer, he said this in a prior hearing, but I had to test it out once I got home. But KVSC-FM out of St. Cloud State University is an Amper station that they have, and he says it serves my district, and I kind of questioned him on that, so I had to check it. But it actually does. You can get it in the northern parts of my district. So the Veterans Voice Radio Project is an important project that gives Minnesota veterans the opportunity to share their stories. If any of you experienced it in the past, there's some pretty notable figures from around the Capitol that have had some military experience that you've heard their voices on the station, and I appreciate that. It captures and archives those stories, which are an important part of our history in the state. So, as I said, Joe Glazer, he's here with us today, and he can probably share a little bit more about the project.
Thank you, and welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Rudd, members. Thank you for having us here today. For the record, my name is Joel Glazer. I am the CEO of Ampers, the Association of Minnesota Public Educational Radio Stations. I apologize again for my voice. That's been hoarse for 6 weeks now, but my apologies. And also my apologies that I don't have any polka music for you today. But I do have something that hopefully will be as entertaining, if not more, and even more educational. We are here today to talk about Senate File 1404, which is our Veterans Voices Korea project. The Veterans Voices project started in 2015 with our World War II stories. Many of you have heard the Veterans Voices World War II stories. When we started to do that, we had family members who said, these veterans are not going to talk to you. They don't talk about their service in World War II. And what we found is that they didn't talk to their families because they wanted to protect their families from the stories. And when we approached them, they would say, oh, we really don't have much to say. And about an hour later, and we had these amazing stories, and they would say, but go talk to somebody else because this is nothing. We boiled those down, put them on the radio, and about 6 months later, I got a couple of calls from family members who said, thank you so much for doing this. These are the only stories that we have from our family. And so we have saved all of those stories, and we are archiving them, and we are working with the Historical Society to make sure that they have them as well. So we started with World War II. Our next part of the series was our Veterans Voices Humanity Center Awards, where we recognized 40 veterans under the age of 40 who had made significant contributions to Minnesota's communities. Next was Veterans Voices Native Warriors, and we chose that because Native Americans have the highest per capita of any cultural group serving in the armed forces. And then we moved from there on to Veterans Voices Vietnam.
This is Veterans Voices with Kevin Berger, memories and stories of Minnesota's Vietnam veterans.
My name is Lee Walker. I served in Vietnam. I was in the Army, and I served in infantry.
After 2 years of college, Lee Walker was drafted and sent to Vietnam.
Everything happened so fast, so quick.
10 months later, his squad of 8 walked into an ambush.
Claymore mines, automatic rifles, and everything they had. Grenade launchers went off. I took a round through my back that came out through my chest, but I had access to the radio. I could talk on the radio. And I told the company commander we had been shot.
Walker was medevaced to a field hospital, then to Saigon, then recovered for a month in Japan before returning to the U.S. for weeks of rehab. He still feels those injuries.
It's internal. It's internal damage. There's shrapnel on my lungs and in my back and stuff like that.
The legacy of that traumatic day is more than physical.
It gets easier, but it's never over. But many of us have sleepless nights where we dream about that firefight that we were in. We dream about what happened and how we got out.
Walker does talk about the GI Bill, which allowed him to complete his education and prepared him for a successful career as an electrician.
I was able to go to school tuition free.
But you earned that.
I earned it, but I didn't know I earned it.
That's an example of one of our 2-minute segments. We also produce 15 to 20-minute podcasts, and the reason we started doing that is out of demand. People started telling us they were hearing these and they wanted much more. So we started to create the podcasts as well. We take the 2-minute segments and we put them all onto CDs that we distribute for free statewide. We distribute them at the Minnesota State Fair, typically between 10 to 14,000 at the State Fair alone, as well as other events throughout the state. When we started to create these and started distributing the CDs, I actually had somebody come up and ask for a stack of them once, and I was a little confused and was wondering if there was a black market for them or what they were doing. And they explained that they were teachers and that they wanted to use them in the classroom. So at that point that we realized that we were not maximizing this, and this was probably about 3 or 4 years back. And so we put together a teacher resource section on our website, but we also convened a teacher focus group. And we asked them, what do you want? Do you want the 2 minutes? Or do you want, my apologies there. Try to make it easy, and that's what happens. Do you want the shorter ones or do you want the longer ones? And so we thought probably wouldn't be either one. And they said the 2 minutes are great. The teachers up there know 2 minutes are great conversation starters. They get the students engaged. 15 to 20 minutes is too long, but it's great homework. And with today's technology, we can assign them to go in and take out a part that they can use for their presentation. So while I took a semester to learn how to edit this, they get on their phone and they take down to 3 minutes and they use it as part. So there's the CDs, there's the on-air, there is the podcast, as well as what is being used in the classroom. So we get a lot done with that. What we are looking for right now is $75,000 for Veterans Voices Korea. We have asked for funding for Korea the past 2 years. Unfortunately, we have not received it. This really we see as our last opportunity because the veterans of that era are dying off. So this is really our last shot to capture those. The Korean War, as you know, is referred to as the Forgotten War. We really do not want it to be the Forgotten War for this project as well. So with that, Madam Chair, members, I do ask support of Senate File 1404. I would like to point out that as a separate request from our request on Monday of Senate File 1783. This has always been a separate project because that funding primarily goes to the stations. This is a dedicated project specifically for the Veterans Voices Project. And with that, I am available should you have any questions.
Thank you. Members, are there questions? Thank you, Lang. Thank you, Senator Lang, for.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd just like to add a little bit, on the Korea subject. This one, and I don't know if I've ever told Joel about this, but I had a grandfather who was a Korean War vet, and he passed away prior to me ever enlisting in the military. And what I would give to go back and hear his stories from what Korea was like, and just to have that little bit of tangible piece would I couldn't even explain it, but I appreciate what you've done, and I appreciate the support of the bill. So.
Thank you, Senator Lang. I think it's important to capture the Korean War veterans because they will not be with us much longer. So with that, Senate File 1404 will be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. Thank you. I believe the next one is yours also, Senator Lang.
Yes, Madam Chair. I will stop prior to the ICORN record.
You can sing.
So,
welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair, Senator Andrew Lang again. I have Senate File 1543, which again is sticking to the Veterans Voices theme. This time we're talking about the Minnesota Humanities Center. So thank you. I'm pleased to the funding request. I'm pleased to the presentation for the funding request for the committee. This is requesting $2.195 for 20 and 21, which is the same funding level that they received in fiscal years 18 and 19 in the last biennium. So the funds will go to support new programming in 3 important programs, the Veteran Voices Program, Why Treaties Matter, and the K-12 Educator Institutes. So today with me I have Ann Hunter, who is the interim president of the Minnesota Humanities Center, and Captain Mike Lotzer, who is Army National Guard veteran from 2004 to 2012, and they're going to provide a short overview of the programs and the funding request. So with that, Ann, would you like to go first?
Welcome to the committee, and please state your name for the record.
My name is Ann Hunter, and I'm the interim president of the Minnesota Humanities Center. I'm joined by Casey DeMarais, our director of strategic partnerships, and Captain Chaplain Mark Lotzer, who is our guest testifier. Thank you for that introduction, Senator Lang, and good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Legacy Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the essential work of the Minnesota Humanities Center that's funded by the Legacy Amendment. As you may know, the Humanities Center is committed to building a more thoughtful, literate, and engaged society, something we all agree we need. Unlike academic institutions that study the humanities, we bring public humanities out of scholarly institutions and into the everyday lives of Minnesotans. As a St. Paul-based nonprofit with a state charter, we offer programs and events throughout Minnesota, and we operate a full-service events center that hosts about 10,000 guests per year. Today, we respectfully request $2.19 million in legacy funding over 2 years to support 3 essential programs. There's an impact statement in your packet on each of those programs, and there's also a 1-pager on top that summarizes the impact of all 3. The first, Veterans Voices, and not to be confused with AMFER's program by the same name, which you just heard about. This is different. This is the original. Our Veterans Voices program amplifies veterans' experiences through storytelling, literature, and workshops. In the last funding cycle, we hosted 27 Veterans Voices events attended by more than 1,400 people. And since 2013, we've recognized the contributions of 145 veterans from 83 communities in Minnesota through our signature Veterans Voices Award program. In FY19, we're introducing several new initiatives. America's Secret War Educator Toolkit tells the untold stories of the Hmong people enlisted by the CIA to prevent the spread of communism during the Vietnam War. Educators salons in Duluth and St. Paul provide college-level educators with reintegration strategies for student veterans. This is a hard one to say. Warrior Writers Workshops are expanded into 5 states, 5 sites in Greater Minnesota. And lastly, we've re-envisioned the Veterans Voices Awards ceremony to center more on the voices of veterans and the transformative power of the humanities. In FY20, we're piloting 2 new programs, Hikes and Humanities and Literature and Medicine. Our second legacy-funded program is Why Treaties Matter, an award-winning traveling exhibit that you may know is on permanent display in the Capitol. Casey will circulate a couple of educator guides from that program. In FY19, we're re-engaging the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council and 11 sovereign nations that led to the creation of that exhibit. And together we will create new content that addresses identified gaps in that exhibit. We'll also be touring it to 6 new sites in the state, and we're thrilled that we have about 30 sites that have asked to host it in 2020. I'm sorry, in fiscal year 20. Our third legacy-funded program is K-12 education. Our current programs build on the Humanities Center's nearly 50-year reputation for transformative educator training. And I use that word transformative intentionally, because that's how teachers describe the impact of the program in their classrooms and in their school buildings. In the last biennium, we hosted 89 educator training events in 24 communities, attended by about 3,000 people, all of whom went back and shared it with other teachers and staff to amplify the impact. Looking ahead, we plan to expand our Absent Narratives collection, which provides free resources to thousands of educators every year. Working with the Duluth-Fond du Lac Nation, we'll be developing a Learning from Place field trip that's grounded in the Ojibwe history. We already have one that's focused on Dakota history and culture. We're redesigning our week-long Educator Institute to accommodate more participants, and we're collaborating with members of the Somali communities to publish a youth anthology that will be distributed to parents and families across Minnesota. We're also launching 2 new community-based grant lines this summer, a Community Partner Fund and a Humanities Innovation Partnership. And both of those are designed to create real change, both in communities and among individual Minnesotans. Now let me take a moment and turn over the podium to Captain Chaplain Mike Lotzer for brief remarks.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here. My name is Mike Lotzer. I served in the U.S. Army from 2004 to 2012. When I came back from Iraq at Fort Lewis, Washington, I was led into a little room with a psychologist, and they asked me a question. She said, what was your most difficult day in Iraq? And I said, well, that's a difficult one to answer. Probably July 16th, 2009, when we were under attack with several casualties, and I made my way through a rocket attack and had the privilege and the difficult task of being with 2 soldiers as they bled to death, whispering in their ear, praying with them, and getting up from that experience and having more red than green on my uniform. But it might be a tie between another day in October where I found a good friend of mine, a fellow officer, who had killed himself. And that is probably why I'm in the room and why you're asking to talk to me, even though I'm a chaplain. And she said, exactly. And she warned me about reintegration issues and how difficult this would be for me due to the amount of trauma that I experienced on this tour. And I smiled and was polite and left and moved on with my life. And then in 2014, I got a call from the Minnesota Humanities Center. And they told me that I was nominated for an award for post-traumatic thriving and contributing to the society. And I hung up the phone, not knowing much about the organization, but feeling this deep sense of relief. And I think looking back, that is because the military culture is literally built on respect and acknowledgement of achievement. We do that in everything we do, from salutes to award ceremonies. And when I got home, I put my Bronze Star and all the medals in a shoebox. It wasn't important to me. But as years went by, it became important because I felt isolated, and I felt like the work I did maybe wasn't as significant. I'm a lead pastor of a church in Burnsville. I enjoy my job. But the Veterans Voices program gave me something I didn't know I needed, which was a non-biased member of the community. I say that because I'm a lead pastor of an evangelical church. The Humanities Center is not a particularly evangelical Christian organization. It's bipartisan. But they affirmed me publicly and said, this one's going to make it. He's okay. They even put on the award on the rise. They didn't know what that meant to me at the time, but it meant a great deal. It gave me the courage to start a nonprofit I'd been toying with for a number of years, thinking about. I'm attending a writing workshop that they're going to hold in May. I've thought of writing a book, and they're offering a place where you can actually have that conversation. There's a lot of good military and veteran worthy missions and nonprofits, and I've rubbed shoulders with almost all of them, and I think it would be less than thoughtful or strategic to not fund this one. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, and thank you for your service. Members, are there questions? Thank you, Senator Lang, for bringing this up. Senator Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I participated in this Educator Institute at one time, and I'm sure I speak for the hundreds, thousands of teachers that did this. I would rank it among the highlights of my professional career. So thank you for continuing that program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Lang, thank you for bringing this forward. With that, Senate File 1543 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Senator Matthews, Senate File 1377.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have Senate File 1377 before you for an appropriation for developing and building a Region 5 Children's Museum in central Minnesota. And so to talk about this project, I want to pass it off to my testifier, Mr. Paul Drange.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Matthews. As he said, my name is Paul Drange, and I currently serve as the Region 5 Children's Museum Board Chairperson. Chair Rood and members, thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. And I want to thank Senator Matthews, Senator Utke, and Senator Gazelka for co-sponsoring our bill. I very much appreciate being able to present to you our request for funds for our museum and to ensure that we connect children and families to the rich arts, culture, and history and heritage of Minnesota and of our region specifically. You'll notice on the second slide of the handout that you have is a map. And for clarity's sake, I just want to quickly point out that Region 5, if you're curious, is one of 9 designated areas served by the education service cooperatives that were formed by statute in the 1970s. The counties this museum will directly serve are Cass, Crow Wing, Morrison, Todd, and Wadena counties. And the Brainerd Lakes area will be home to this museum. The Region 5 Children's Museum and its partners envision a more vibrant and connected region to ensure all children enjoy positive education experiences while embracing our regional legacy and heritage. Our partners in this endeavor are many. They include many that participated in listening sessions, parent groups, and representatives from area school districts, as well as connections to business and industry. And on this partner slide, I just want to point out our board and planning committee members were proud of the great group of people that have worked on this project to this point in time. And another piece of paper, a letter, was placed in your packets earlier today in support of our project. And I think it's important to point out quickly that this is certainly an educational experience place first for kids. That's the main focus. But we also understand, and other museums that have presented have mentioned this, the importance of the museum being impactful to the greater community and to economic development and to building tourism into the areas where they're at. So the letter you have is from the president of the Brainerd Lakes Chamber of Commerce, Matt Killian, and I'll encourage you to read that at your leisure, but I just wanted to point out that that was in your packet, and he's also a member of our board. and we're excited to have his involvement and support in the project. Just a quick rundown of background. In 2015, we started some planning meetings and just discussions about what it would mean to bring a children's museum to the center of the state, to our area. We created a planning committee in 2016, bringing many regional leaders together. In 2017, I mentioned those listening sessions and other pieces that we put together to continue the work. And in just this past calendar year in 2018, we started planning for site selection, master planning for the facility, which I'll get into shortly, and exhibit pre-design. And we're currently now in the process of an RFP for picking a site, which we should have completed in mid-May, and also a capital campaign. So we're excited about that timeline and how we're moving now, and there's important pieces being put in place for the museum to open very soon. So the next few pages are just highlights of that exhibit pre-design that we have completed. And this is important to point out because we want to make sure it's clear that the funds we are requesting will be focused in on exhibit development and educational programming as they're intended. And you'll see on the next few pages, we've found in our exhibit work that these are very specific and applicable things to our region. If you know anything about that part of the state, you know we have lakes, you know we have woods, we have a lot of outdoor opportunities for kids and families, and we also have agricultural experiences in the western part of that region. So you'll see exhibits called At the Lake, From the Garden, Into the Woods, On the Road, which is also a touch on the transportation industry and specifically the railroad system that comes through our area. Open for possibilities and working in the great outdoors. So we're excited about tying all those things together through the work that we're working through right now and making sure those funds apply to their specific purpose. So again, to speak specifically to the educational aspect of the museum, we have a great relationship with our regional schools. We'll be working on educational programming to host events and connecting the general environments in our region and across our state to children and families that come to visit and the school districts that are in our region as well. So in that plan, we've got Parent and Caregiver Resource Hub planned, Teacher Center for Interactive Learning, where we'll bring our educators in to take much of the content of the museum back to our school districts, programs and events, and an interactive mobile design for our exhibits that will allow them to be shared outside of the walls of the museum. So future considerations on the next page. We'll continue to work towards securing funding for construction in the coming months, and site selection, as I mentioned, will be complete, and we'll work on pre-construction and exhibit design in this coming calendar year that we're in now, and we look forward to exhibit installation and opening in the 2020-2021 timeframe. So this brings us to where we are today. It's important to remember, too, that we have secured operational funds from our local service cooperative to take care of that part of it, so we can really focus in the use of these funds on that educational focus and the exhibit design. So I would simply end by saying that we're excited for our future, and our request is for $340,000 for the next biennium, $170,000 in each year. Specific for that exhibit development and design and developing that educational programming. And I would be happy to entertain any questions from the committee at this time.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? Thank you, Senator Matthews. With no further discussion, Senate File 1377 will be laid over for possible inclusion. And thank you. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much.
Senator Senjum. Welcome, Senator. When you're ready, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Senate File 1688, pretty straightforward. An appropriation of Minnesota Public Radio, $1.95 million for each of 20 and 21 to great programming and other matters really that are easily seen on the bill. So with that, I'm just going to refer to my witnesses. We'll just keep this moving.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee. Who would like to go first?
Madam Chair, members, I'm John Kavanaugh with NPR. We have provided with you today a folder with an extensive background of our programs, some of the history. Please do not mistake my brevity today with lack of passion or importance of these programs. But you have been very generous with your time. All of you have opened your offices to us where we could go into detail and discuss all those programs. Some of you have participated, whether that be with class notes or bring the sing in events in your communities. And again, we greatly appreciate Senator Senjum and Senator Weber for bringing this bill forward, and we'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Ms. Hocker, would you like to?
Thank you. Kay Hocker. I'm a regional manager with Minnesota Public Radio, and I just want to reiterate my thanks, Madam Chair and committee members, for your consideration today and for allowing us to be here. And in particular, I want to thank Senator Senjum for authoring our bill.
Thank you. Members, are there questions? Senator Torres-Ray. Thank you, members. And I think also for Greater Minnesota, we rely on that for our emergency alert system. And so that's a very important thing in Greater Minnesota, and also the Amber Alerts that you get on your phone. And so it is a very, besides the program, it's a very important piece for the state. So thank you, Senator Senjum. With no further questions,
just to wrap it up,
yes,
Minnesota
Senjum.
Public Radio, I think, is part of the fabric of our great state, and we hope we can give this consideration.
Thank you. Senate File 1688, Senator Senjum, will be laid over for possible inclusion, and thank you for coming today. Senator Schwedinsky, welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I am very, very pumped and excited to talk about this. I don't know if I've been this excited about anything in my 3 years here. About a few months ago at a breakfast meeting, this gentleman from Buffalo, Minnesota gave this presentation about how he brought that the Buffalo Library System bought a few of these telescopes to check out. And he explained the success story of this program and how the night sky has been a subject of fascination for humanity since time began. It has inspired and instilled a sense of wonder in everyone who has taken a moment to gaze up. Many of us have fond memories of going out with a friend or a relative and after purchasing a cheap telescope to just look at the constellations and planets. For a very relatively low cost, libraries could join the 21st century and have these available for checkout. Our ability to view the night sky progresses as we, as parents of our children, when our kids bring those home from the library and they're so light and they're so affordable, and the kids will walk in the door and go, Mom, Dad, let's go out on the deck tonight instead of watching reruns on TV. And we'll all go, wow, you want to go outside with me? And yeah, Dad, I want your mom. I want you to see this stuff. And I just think it's a golden opportunity to bring the libraries into the 21st century when their numbers are somewhat declining in checking out books. And maybe they'll check out a telescope and they'll look over and go, wow, what are these things on these shelves? Oh, they're books. Let's check out one of those while we're here too. This has the opportunity to revolutionize our library systems and as we progress through the 21st century. So with that said, I have one presenter today, Irene Kelly, who's going to take it on from here. Thank you.
No, Ms. Kelly, that's a tough act to follow.
Trust me, I was going to say that.
Welcome.
I am Irene. Thank you. I am Irene Kelly. Thank you, members of the committee, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Swedzinski, for sponsoring this bill. It really is an honor to be here today. I am actually the district governor of Rotary District 5950, which is West Central Minnesota. So this program came about through a Rotary project. And Rotary has provided a grant to fund some telescopes thus far. So the bill provides funding for Minnesota school districts and library systems to actually loan telescopes. And the project would fund over 2 years approximately 500 telescopes for loan. Astronomy inspires STEM learning and curiosity in science and technology. And so that's a really strong focus for us. Funding also offers a hands-on outdoor experience for students and their families that borrow the telescopes. The funding would provide 250 quality telescopes over 2 years, 500 total over 2 years, that you would check out just like a book. So there has been a telescope in the Buffalo Library for over a year, and there's always a 4-month waiting list. They can't keep up. There's so much demand. There's a nationally recognized program that's about 8 years old. Other states and areas have done this, and the same thing is true. The waiting list is huge, usually very long. And volunteers really make this program work. There's very little maintenance on the telescopes. The one in Buffalo's had no maintenance so far in over a year, borrowed on a regular basis with a 4-month waiting list. But there is some need for updating and so forth, which Mark can talk a little bit about. And so the Rotarians, the project is designed so that Rotarians would support this as volunteers to maintain the library, the telescopes. So as I said, Buffalo has one. We also approved a grant through Rotary for, I believe it was 20 telescopes in the Great River Regional Library, and those scopes have been in for a few months now, and they also have a 4 to 5 month waiting list. It's an excellent, we have excellent technical administrators through the Astronomical Society who are able and willing to support this fund. So bottom line is that through the Astronomical Society and Rotary, we have the network to implement this and the volunteers to maintain the scopes on a regular basis. And you have in your packet a handout with testimony from the branch librarian in Buffalo, as well as a patron who's actually borrowed and used the telescopes. So I just would bring your attention to that when you have an opportunity. There are many more that we could provide because there's great excitement and response to this, as Senator Swedzinski mentioned. So Mark, your turn.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee.
And please a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Please identify yourself for the tape.
My name is Mark Jobe. I am a member of the Minnesota Astronomical Society. I am the same member that Irene spoke about, Mark Boyd. He's the Rotarian. He's the person that brought the first telescope to the Buffalo Library. And let me tell you that I went to a regional library meeting at St. Cloud for the Great River Regional Library and met all the librarians and did a presentation about this telescope, and they were all excited. They were ecstatic. And they also let me know that, you know, they had already sent these telescopes into the field, and you know they had 20 telescopes. All of a sudden, they had a backlog of 3 to 4 months, like Irene said. And I was amazed. I thought that you'd inject 20 telescopes into that system, that then we'd have them sitting on a shelf waiting to be checked out. But that's not true. And a little bit about the telescope. We modify it so that it's hardy. It can take some abuse. Those 8 and 9-year-olds are not going to hurt these telescopes, and I know that for a fact. I mean, I've used one. I've used one in light polluted areas. So even within the light pollution of the metro area here, you would still get great views of the moon, the planets. And that's exactly what we're after. And we're not just talking about using these telescopes at night. We're trying to get them to use them during the day. You know, look at birds staying on power poles, cell phone towers, whatever. You know, get out and use them. You know, pardon the pun, sky's the limit. I mean, I've heard a lot about history today. You know, every photon that you look at that's coming from a galaxy or a star, those are old. That's history. That stuff has already happened. We're talking about millions and millions of years ago. So I thank you for your time. I really appreciate funding this. It's just a little thing. You know, if we can affect one person's life, become the next doctor or scientist, it's great. So thank you very much for even considering us. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this forward. Members, are there questions? Well, Senator Swedzinski, I can see why you're so excited about this project. So
thank you, Madam Chair and members. It's a pretty cool thing, and I just thank you for listening today.
All right. With that, Senate File 563 will be laid over for possible inclusion. And Senator Swedzinski, you have one more, Senate File 1802.
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
When you're ready.
You know, as a side note, Madam Chair, I wish we could put this day on video. It's just kind of a cool day.
It's a fun day, isn't it?
Taxpayers could see these little 30-second snippets of all these testimonies and know where their money is going, I think it'd be a good thing. So. Thank you, Madam Chair. The bill before you is Senate File 1802, which provides grants for civic education programs for our youngest citizens. My proclivity for getting our youth involved in the political process is unwavering. For little cost, very little cost, we have created, these people have created nonpartisan programs to help young people learn about the political process at an early age and find out what their roles are as they continue into adulthood in the gaining a sense of political efficacy and civic virtue. So with that said, here are the testifiers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you and welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. My name is Amy Anderson and I run Minnesota Civic Youth, one of the organizations in the Minnesota Civic Education Coalition, which includes the Learning Law and Democracy Foundation and the YMCA Youth in Government program. Whenever I discuss politics and civic involvement with others from around the country, they often say, "But you're from Minnesota. It's different there." It's true that we are different, and it's a difference that deserves to be admired and preserved. Although Minnesota is home to many different cultures, many of whom we've heard from today through the testimony, one cultural heritage we all share is our civic cultural heritage. Let me give a few examples. We vote in large numbers, most of the time leading the nation in voter turnout. We cherish strong local problem-solving efforts, school boards, city councils, chambers of commerce, and neighborhood groups. We take the phrase, "we the people," very seriously. We have faith in our state's government, and we get involved because we believe that it matters. We know, however, that we can't take our civic culture for granted. As former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor has said, "Knowledge of our system of governance and our rights and responsibilities as citizens is not passed along through the gene pool. Each generation of Americans must be taught these basics." When it comes to civic education, I was one of the lucky ones. My parents were very civically minded and talked to me about the rights and responsibilities of being a citizen. I had teachers like Senator Swedzinski who were passionate about civic education and inspired me to learn about how the government works, along with the rules and practices we need to preserve our democracy. Not every child in our state is so lucky. In the past decade, public education has turned sharply toward science, math, and literacy to help students develop employable skills. And the fact is, students need both: preparation to participate in the workforce and preparation to participate in our civic society. And this is what the Minnesota Education Coalition does. Through programs like the Kids Voting Minnesota Network, we coordinated nearly 200 polling sites for K-12 students on Election Day this past fall. This included several high schools where we provided real voting machines to make the process even more authentic. We do this because studies show that voting is habit forming. Once you vote, you're more likely to vote again and again. Another exciting effort focused on student election judges. Increasing the number of student election judges serves multiple goals. It increases the number of election judges who are bilingual in targeted languages, addresses short and long-term needs for effective technology-adept poll workers, increases the ethnic and age diversity in our election judges to better reflect the faces of our community, helps high school students attain civic skills and dispositions, and provides high school students with increased connections to their community. This program is a triple win. Students like being election judges because they get paid and feel valued for their contributions. Election offices value the opportunity to expand and diversify their judge pool. And our democracy benefits because research shows that serving as an election judge inspires students to become active voters and civic participants. This fall, we worked with several counties and cities to train and place more than 1,000 student election judges at polling places. Maybe some of you noticed a few new faces when you went to vote. Thank you so much for making these programs possible through legacy funding.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jennifer Bloom, and I direct the Learning Law and Democracy Foundation, one of the Minnesota Civic Education Coalition's partners. Before I share a bit about our programs, I want to point out a few things on the back of the handout that you should have in front of you. Our impact data is on the upper left area of the handout. The programs we run are on the bottom right. You might notice an icon that says new. Those are new things this year, including the election judges program. The map, I draw your attention to the map. You can see that we are impacting communities from one end of the state to the other end of the state. In many of these situations, these are folks that can't come to something that we offer in St. Paul, Minneapolis. Teachers can't get here, and students participate where they are, and they can get at resources to use to educate students from the website, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. I want to highlight just 3 things. First, the website, teachingcivics.org. The Legacy Committee funded this the very first year of the Legacy funding. And without that funding, it would not have happened. It connects educators both in school and out of school with a searchable database of nearly 1,000 lessons that have been vetted for accuracy, bias, and effectiveness. This means that not every teacher or educator is doing it by themselves. In the past year, Teaching Civics placed these materials at the fingertips of more than 3,000 users from International Falls to Wells. And I bring up Wells because I grew up in Keister, Minnesota, not far away. And there are 30 users within the South Central education system that use the website. Second, I want to talk a little bit about our research-based youth programs that involve more than 5,000 youth, many from high-risk communities. They include Project Citizen, which teaches young people how to work as a team to solve community problems of their choice. The top projects are then displayed at our annual Project Citizen Showcase at the Capitol Rotunda on May 15th every year. Please stop by. And our next program is We the People, the Citizen, and the Constitution, which helps young people learn about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The class that wins our annual state competition held in the state capitol will represent Minnesota at the National We the People competition in Washington, D.C. at the end of the month. They are busy raising money, so if you feel like donating, just let me know. Shout out to Cannon Falls. That's the school that's going this year. And finally, Super Civics. This is a new program we are developing for young learners, beginning with kindergartners. And we've got a panel of elementary teachers that have worked diligently for the last year in writing materials and reviewing and coming up with ideas to teach our students about the foundational block of civics. We hear oftentimes that by the time they get to 12th grade, they don't know enough. We need to start earlier. So that's what the goal of this is. And we want to use what teachers are already doing. For example, when they teach about the rules, we want to have the teachers or the educators add a lesson about why do we have those rules and how those rules might be different in other areas. Parents came to us and said, you know, the rules at home are different than the rules at school, and it would be really helpful if students knew that. Or how decisions are made in a class. Sometimes they vote, and everybody knows. Sometimes they put their head down. I mean, the whole idea of voting begins in kindergarten. Now, this is our Super Civics program, and we just get excited when we talk about it because you can just see it. There could be Super Citizen Awards. They could be schools that are superhero civics heroes. We can even envision a cape that the lead civic hero in the elementary, kindergarten grade gets to wear it for a day. We must not take our civic cultural heritage for granted. It's a fragile thing. The Minnesota Civic Education Coalition appreciates this and is committed to providing civic education to help preserve it. Thank you for making this possible, and we ask for your continued support. Thanks.
Thank you. Members, are there questions? Questions? Well, thank you, Senator Swedzinski, for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And with that, Senate File 1802 will be laid over for possible inclusion, and thank you for coming today. Senator Marty, welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate File 1291 is for Oops, Senate File 664. Wrong folder. I'm really pleased to be here with Michelle Furr from Como Zoo. I just wanted to say that Como Zoo is the most visited cultural site in Minnesota. Second is a tourist attraction only to the Mall of America. And of 1.8 million visitors, fully a third of them are non-metro area, either greater Minnesota or from outside of the state. And the city of St. Paul puts in a big investment of it, even though a minority of the people coming to the zoo are from outside of the zoo. So I think it truly is a great state resource, and really pleased that they're here again to push again for the legacy funding as they've done in the past. And with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle Furr.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Michelle Furr, and I'm the director of Como Park Zoo and Conservatory. In your handouts, there's a full packet and presentation. I'm going to be very brief and not go through that, but I'm happy to answer questions when I am finished. But as you know, there's a treasure in Minnesota's backyard, a world-class natural habitat in the heart of our state. Como is owned by all, enjoyed by all, and free for all. There are very few places like us anywhere, and at Como, we see our work as one part love, one part responsibility, and always a joy to share. For more than a century, we have been an educationally, conveniently located, budget-friendly alternative, but we are so much more. We are driven by a powerful mission to inspire the public to value the presence of living things in our lives. Como Park Zoo and Conservatory is the most visited cultural attraction with 1.8 annual visitors that come from all over the state of Minnesota. And not only is Como free, we attract a very diverse audience, racially, economically, and geographically. We are inclusive and provide access for all. Whether it's creating fun experiences that deepen knowledge and a sense of connection, or making sure it's easy and welcoming for all people to visit, Como is always inviting, always inspiring. This past biennium with our legacy funds, we were able to look at more inclusive programming, like our sensory-friendly days and events, senior strolls, which are probably right on Twin Cities Live right now being focused on, and our First Wednesdays, where we feature an interpreter, an ALS interpreter for all our added value programs, and we hope to add other languages in the near future. At Como, we inspire learning. We invite everyone to share our love for the plants and animals. And we are a proven steward of past legacy funds for a number of initiatives that would never be possible without these funds, and those are detailed in your handout. We have seen firsthand the programs that we do and what we can have and the ability that we can reach Minnesotans across the state with the work we do. For example, our education residency program offers week-long experiences for an entire class to use the zoo and conservatory as their classroom with our professional education staff. Each year, we are able to reach 700 students just with that program. And for classes out in greater Minnesota, like Folwell Elementary in Rochester, who comes every year, we actually go to them for a few of the days of the week and then bus them for free to Como as part of the rest of their week. We currently are able to offer 28 weeks of programming, and last year we received applications for over 141 classes from 41 different school districts. We have been able to leverage the legacy funds with private support through our nonprofit partner Como Friends to help support these programs. Last summer, Como featured a national art exhibit called Washed Ashore to Save the Sea. The installation featured large-scale sea sculptures made entirely of marine debris washed and collected from beaches, graphically illustrating the pollution found in our oceans and waterways. The artwork was combined with education signage to teach students about water stewardship, responsible consumer habits, and how every action counts to help save our water, even here in Minnesota. We also featured blooming butterflies once again last summer, and we are in a month or two opening pollinators, All the Buzz, on Memorial Day. We've commissioned this through a local Minnesota design company, and we'll replace the butterflies with live bees that will be enclosed, but we want to be able to also point out what you can do in your backyards to make it pollinator friendly. From preschool programming like Little Explorers, to interpretive enhancements, to a music series, to special events and art exhibits, these programs would not exist today without the arts and cultural legacy and your past support, so thank you. And thank you for letting us come just briefly talking about some of the highlights as well as what we can continue to do. And just a little plug for those who just need a little sense of spring. I walked through the spring flower show in our sunken garden, and the sense, I was going to bring some tulips with me today, but I thought I will save those for another time. But if you need to recharge your batteries, that's a place to walk through at this time of the year. So thank you again.
And thank you. Members, are there any questions? You know, Senator Marty, I have wonderful memories of going to the zoo with my parents, and now I have brought grandchildren and great-grandchildren to the zoo. So it's such a wonderful, wonderful experience for generations to experience. So thank you for bringing that forward. With no further questions, Senate File 664 will be laid over for possible inclusion. And I believe you have the next bill also, Senator Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate File 1291 is for the Bell Museum, which is a state institution actually in state law since 1870 or so. You can read about how the state established this historical preservation of all of our arts and all of our natural things. And anyways, we have the fortune of having a new building the legislature funded through a bonding bill a couple of years ago, and it's a wonderful facility. And with that, I'll have Denise Young take a look and talk you through what they're asking for here.
Thank you and welcome to the committee.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator Marty. Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Denise Young, and I'm honored to serve as the Executive Director of the Bell Museum. The Bell Museum, indeed, is the state's official natural history museum. In 1872, the legislature called for the founding of a museum to collect, preserve, interpret, and tell the story of Minnesota's rich biodiversity. And so we've been doing that for 147 years. We are indeed a statewide institution. Our collections are comprised of plant and animal specimens from every county in Minnesota and are used statewide by natural resource professionals and others in their work. Our educational programs also serve the entire state. Just in the last 2 weeks, our portable planetarium outreach program has been to Owatonna, Alexandria, and Farmington. And additionally, we provide technical assistance and content to 7 planetariums in Minnesota, including those in Moorhead, Rochester, Duluth, Mankato, and Marshall. And as many of you are aware, the Bell Museum reopened in a new facility last year. And so I'd like to thank you and your colleagues for the funding. It was in 2014 that the funding was designated to build that facility. And that funding, coupled with significant private support, has made all the difference in our ability to serve and engage Minnesotans and to meet our mission of igniting curiosity and wonder, exploring our connections to nature and the universe, and creating a better future for our evolving world. In this first year in our new home, we've been open for 8.5 months. We are on pace in our first year to receive 200,000 visitors, with an additional 90,000 visitors to the state's new dedicated public planetarium that is now also part of the Bell Museum. And this is a huge increase from the museum's average attendance of 38,000 prior to investment in the new facility. So again, thank you. I've included some photos of the new museum in your packet, as we know that some of you have not been able to visit yet. Please know that you are invited to visit at any time. I'd be delighted to take you on a tour. What makes a visit to the Bell Museum so special is that no matter where in the state that you're from, you see something of your home in the museum. The main exhibit gallery is organized by the 3 major biomes of Minnesota, and our famous collection of Francis Lee Jaquie's nature dioramas are central to the Bell Museum visitor experience. They are incredible, actually priceless artworks. The materials of the building itself also reflect Minnesota's natural resources, including steel from the Iron Range and white pine from central North Carolina. Our landscape includes all native plantings. So in just an afternoon at the Bell Museum, you can experience the entire state to appreciate its beauty and diversity. Now, on to the specifics of our request, which are also outlined in on a page in your packet. Our goal is to deepen engagement with all Minnesotans. We are the state's museum, and it's imperative that we be able to serve everyone. The new Bell Museum building itself has removed physical access barriers that we once had in our prior facility, and through generous private support, we are able to ensure people with financial barriers are able to access the museum. But to continue to increase access to the museum's resources, we are requesting one-time support from the Legacy Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund to invest in the development of materials and programs that will expand our ability to meet the needs of Minnesota's increasingly diverse population. This includes people with disabilities, as well as culturally and linguistically diverse communities. Our request is $300,000 in each year of the biennium. We have organized our request into 2 broad areas, equal access and cultural equity. Equal access initiatives would include working with people with disabilities to make sure that the museum is accessible to the 600,000 plus people in Minnesota who have disabilities, as well as a fast-growing population segment in our state, and that is senior citizens. This funding would allow the Bell to provide app-based audio description for people with low vision, American Sign Language translation, as well as tactile guides and models, programs that serve people with autism, and we would also explore technology solutions for planetarium accessibility. Cultural equity and engagement initiatives involve multilingual audio tours of the galleries and a suite of culturally relevant experiences about Minnesota cultural heritage designed in collaboration with communities. One such initiative that's in discussion right now involves integrating Indigenous language preservation activities into our natural history programs. Both equal access and cultural equity initiatives include community engagement activities as well as informational materials to let people who need these resources know about everything we would have to offer. We've structured our request to build the capacity of the museum to serve these communities and to do so in a sustainable way. These investments will live on long after the funding period, and they will continue to serve the people of Minnesota for many years to come, creating opportunities for even more people to interact with the state's heritage, the arts, and natural history, as well as increasing public awareness about the natural world. So, Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and I would be happy to entertain questions.
Thank you. Members, are there questions? So, Senator Marty and Ms. Young, this has nothing to do, I think there was some confusion over the equal access program. So your new building is totally ADA compliant. This is just a program to expand on other types of access, but it has nothing to do with the physical access of your
building itself is.
Okay. I think there was a member that had a question on that, and I wanted to make sure that I addressed that. So
It's just, again, for, Madam Chair, for people who are sight impaired or whatever, other ways of addressing it, ASL and things like that.
All right. Thank you. I wanted to make sure that that was clear for one of our members. So
thank you.
Thank you. With no further discussion, then Senator Marty, Senate File 1291 will be laid over for possible inclusion. And thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you very much.
If you haven't been to the new Bell Museum, come see it. It's a beautiful place.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Ralph, you're up next. Welcome to the committee, Senator Ralph.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I'll be brief. I do have two testifiers that want to speak. This appropriation request is for a children's museum in St. Cloud. I notice we have several requests for funding for children's museums, so I will try to distinguish why this request is different. And I will just, as a matter of introduction, indicate that there is going to be a significant match to this. In fact, will probably exceed the 50%. And I'll leave the details to my testifiers. They have already raised significant money in the community, and this will be for a children's museum in downtown St. Cloud. With that, I would like to introduce Greg Rigsted as the first testifier.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Greg Rigsted, and I'm the treasurer of the board for the Great River Children's Museum out of St. Cloud. I'd like to start by thanking the committee members, of course, for this opportunity. But secondly of all, I'd like to thank your staff, Mr. Elfritz. He was very helpful. For those of us who are unacquainted with your world, it's nice to get good, helpful information. He was very good, so appreciate that.
It's much appreciated. Thank you.
You've heard from a lot of children's museums. You know a lot of this information, so I'm not going to go over that type of information, but I do want to share two things with you before I turn it over to Sarah. And that is that, first of all, they're talking about all these children's museums. We visited all those in the state, and the board members have visited over another 30 nationwide to take a look at what all of these are doing. And we also attended in 2012, Dr. Glenn Paulum and I went to the American Association of Children's Museums, and we asked them, what do we do first? How do we get this going? And they were very clear, and they said, you need a building. Otherwise, you're going to spend all your money on operating capital, you're going to spend it on programming, and after 5 years, you're going to run out of money, and there you are. So we began in 2012 to seek a building. And fortunately, the Liberty State Bank in St. Cloud, which is a very community-minded bank, called us up last June and said, how would you like our bank? And we said, that sounds pretty good. And they said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll give you the bank, we'll give you a year's taxes, and we'll give you a year insurance just to sweeten the deal. And we said, that sounds even better. So they gave us a $1.5 million bank that was working. I mean, they walked out on November 19th. We walked in on December 12th. Heating worked, air conditioning worked, all those kind of fun things. They had a new headquarters on the outskirts of town, so that's why they were going to give this bank. And I hope the handout got you. There's a picture of the bank on there. It's a beautiful bank. It's right downtown. It has plenty of parking. The city's delighted to work with us because, of course, they want more downtown. As I mentioned, it's worth $1.5 million. We've been fundraising at that point because we know we got to, it's still a bank, you know. So we got to make it into a children's museum. I'm not sure what we're going to do with 3 vaults, but if you got to use for 3 vaults, just let us know and we'll try to get that to you. But anyway, we've raised well over $200,000 and we haven't even really started fundraising. And this morning, from yesterday's mail, I noticed I got another check from Facebook. So, and that's thanks to Sarah, by the way. She does a lot of good work on that. But anyway, the building and all that fundraising going well, and you're an integral part. The legacy funds are a very integral part of that. The last thing I want to mention is that from conception to now, Dr. Glenn Palm was he's retired now, but he was the chair of child development over at St. Cloud State University. And he is, under his guidance, it really has developed so that this is under the guidance of all child development experts in St. Cloud area. And I think that's a real strength for this museum, so I have high hopes for it. And at that point, I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, and thank you, committee.
Welcome.
I'm one of those early childhood experts he's talking about. I'm a parent educator in ECFE, and I was a student under Glenn Palm when I went to St. Cloud State and got my certificate for parent education. And now I'm a board member at the Children's Museum. I'm also the mom of 2 big kids. They're 14 and 11 right now. And we have been wanting a resource like this in St. Cloud for a long time. I'm a lifelong resident there, and I remember as a child wishing there was more to do. And having been there my whole life, I've seen the community change, and now there is a lot more to do, but this is definitely still a need area in our community. I taught kindergarten as I started my career, and with young children, it's hard to take them very far on a bus for a field trip. So we didn't really have opportunities to go to children's museums as a field trip at that point. So we're excited to have this in our community. As a parent, I homeschooled my children for the last 7 years, and we spent a lot of time on the road going to museums across the state, and it was a wonderful opportunity that not as many people get as it would be nice to have. Now as an adult, I'm noticing all the diversity that we have in our community that we didn't have 20 years ago. It's economic diversity as well as racial and cultural diversity. And the families that I work with in ECFE, it's clear the families that do get the opportunity to have rich experiences like children's museums and those who can't. And we know the power that early learning experiences have on children and their future success. So this is just going to be amazing for young children in our community and a great gathering space to help build bridges between all these cultural groups that maybe otherwise wouldn't cross paths in a meaningful way. They'll be able to interact and play together. We've already had a lot of interaction and bridge building through this project so far. Just the richness of the people who've come together to work on it, from psychology, healthcare, early childhood education, higher education with the many higher education institutions in the St. Cloud area, and volunteers from all sectors, from business, nonprofit, and all the diverse groups that we have in our community. It's really exciting to see people rallying together for this project. And Greg already mentioned the wonderful donation of the building right in the heart of downtown, really accessible to everyone. And the donations that we've had, the engagement has been amazing. And the legacy funds will just help us take that next step, really help us to bring the community together to create some programs to start engaging families and getting their input on the project. And then in the next year to start with our first floor and some cornerstone exhibits. That would be the phase one really of the remodel. So it's really exciting times for the museum, and I appreciate you taking the time to hear about it and hope for your support.
Thank you very much. Members, are there questions? So this museum is not open yet, you just have the building and you're doing the planning and building of it
We're
right now?
currently doing some outreach events. So there's a public library, or there's an event at the public library held by the United Way, which is one example of a cooperation that we're having in our community. So we'll be taking over a nice big space and having big building blocks and small building blocks and just a big hands-on theme for children to come and then for their parents to give input on what they'd like to see in the museum. So we'll be doing lots of events like that until our building, we have some spaces that are compliant with code that we can start having some groups to come in and experience some play and learning together in our headquarters.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Members, if there's no further discussion, Senate File 645 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you, Senator Ralph, and your testifiers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to point out one thing that I didn't before, and that is that I would point out the regional nature of this particular facility. St. Cloud is central Minnesota, but we have several very large, I don't say very large, but several other large areas, Waite Park, Sartell, St. Joe, that would be served by this particular facility. So it's not just downtown St. Cloud. So I just wanted to point that out. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Senator Klein, we have saved the best for last. And I appreciate your patience today, and welcome to the committee. When you're ready.
Madam Chair and Committee, thank you so much. And we're very grateful. The City of South St. Paul is extremely proud to be the site of the first woman voter in the United States under the suffrage amendment. And with that, I'd like to offer my testifiers.
Great. Welcome to the committee. Who would like to go first? All right. Ms. Griffith?
Afternoon. My name is Deb Griffith. I'm the Community Affairs Liaison for the City of South St. Paul. And with this topic, we understand patience because it took a long time for the women of the United States to be able to vote. So we also want to thank you for sticking it out with us as well. And we also want to thank Senator Klein and Senator Bingham for authoring this bill. So on August 26, 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified in Washington, giving women the same constitutional rights for the ballot. On August 27th, the next morning, at 6 o'clock, Marguerite Newberg, a 21-year-old South St. Paul resident, voted for a water bond bill. There was an election scheduled, and it just so happened to be the next morning. That made her the first woman in the United States to vote after the ratification of the 19th Amendment. There are a few fun facts that we know, but I'm going to keep them very brief. We know the location of it was the original City Hall, which is now Loshy Park. We also know that there were 2 ballot boxes there that day, one for the men and one for the women. We also know, looking at the minutes from our city council, that there were votes, they were counted separate. It would say 49 votes women, 52 votes men. And we looked previously prior to the 19th Amendment, and that was not recorded that way. So for the first few elections, the votes were counted separately. So we would like to do, because it is coming up to the 100th anniversary of the first women to vote next year on August 27, 2020, mark the location as to where this took place. We would like to invite the state and the nation to come and celebrate with us, as we will do a huge celebration marking the spot of the location. We would like to put a monument in Lashy Park marking that spot, and we want the whole state to celebrate with us. So we invite you now to our celebration, and we have a year-long celebration that we are planning that we will kick off this year. And we find it's going to be very exciting for 2020 with not only the election that will be taking place, but also with the census taking place. So we are combining all three into one. And really the final finale, the fireworks of the event, will be the unveiling of the monument. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we have Mr. Mayor here today.
Madam Chair, members, thank you
Welcome.
for having us and listening to us. And I just wanted to say thank you for hearing this. Thank you to Senator Klein for bringing this forward today. As you look around our state, there's
Mr.
not
Mayor,
a lot of...
could I just interject? Could you just identify yourself for the record, please?
Yes, you
We
bet.
know who you are.
I'm sorry. Mayor James Francis.
Thank you.
South St. Paul. So there's not many monuments to our females in the state, and I think this is a great opportunity to do so, and one I think is fitting for not only the city of South St. Paul, but for the state of Minnesota. So we humbly request the funds, and thank you for hearing us today.
Thank you. And Senator Klein, this sounds like a great celebration. So, members, are there questions? Well, thank you. Hearing no further discussion, Senate File 1759 will be laid over for possible inclusion, and thank you so much for being here today.
Madam Chair, thank you for hearing the bill.
Members, seeing no further business before us, we are adjourned. And thank you for your patience in sticking with us today. Much appreciated.